So you have this lady who works for the state, and she makes some comments on her own personal website, not the work website, mind you, her own website. Comments that some people would say are kind of bigoted and jerky, and I would agree with that. But does she have the right to do that? Should she have the freedom of speech to express her opinions, however jerky they may be, on her own dollar, on her own time? That is the question. Number 663-1270. Hiya, hiya, hiya. Hey there, hi there, ho there. You're as welcome as can be. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270, streaming online all across the known universe, including Krypton. SuperTalk1270.com. I was going to make some cheesy joke about where we're not streaming, but the fact is we're streaming everywhere. Even Bayonne, New Jersey. That dang year, buddy. Anyway, so obviously, and by the way, this is going to be a good show, because coming up in the next hour, I've got something to offend everybody. You know, I like to think of myself as an equal opportunity offender on this here program. And that is certainly true as it goes today. I am beholden to no political party, to no political agenda. I think they're all a bunch of crooks. I think they should all get the bum's rush, the old heave-ho. What I'm saying is, if you listen to the next hour and you don't hear something that really cheeses you off, then you're just plain not paying attention. Maybe you should get on Ritalin or something, because it's going to be that kind of a show. We got something for everybody, something to offend you, no matter what side of the aisle you fall upon. And be careful about who you fall upon if you're falling upon somebody in the aisle. Number here, again, number 663-1270, area code 701. And if you're listening outside the immediate area, you can also post your comments at the website, supertalk1270.com. Check that out by all means. All right, so we have this lady, a deputy court clerk, works in Minot, North Dakota. Lovely little town with a big old Air Force base about 2 hours north of here. And she's been issued a reprimand for a post on Facebook, her own Facebook page, mind you. It sparked a bit of a firestorm over her suggestion that the Native American Indians protesting the pipeline be allowed. Well, let me just read it for you here. I've got a word for word. Here's exactly what she said. And as I read this, bear in mind that it was posted, and I double-checked on this, because the original article didn't really make it all that clear whether it was her page she posted on or a page at work. Yeah, page at work, that's a whole different ballgame. They can, public or private, whoever you work for, they can tell you to do whatever they want as far as it's their website, their Facebook page, whatever. But this was something she posted on her own personal page. All right? Here we go. Here's what she said. Solution. Let them keep their sacred land. Go around their water and burial grounds. It obviously means a lot to them, and they should have it. Then, stop the monthly checks and all the government payouts. Stop all the subsidies and handouts. Done. Game over. Payouts stop today. Everyone gets a fresh start. The government has paid out enough over the last few hundred years. Enough is enough. Now, that's the gist of it. That's what she said. Now, some people would consider that to be a bigoted, inappropriate comment. Me, I don't necessarily agree. I think it's a valid issue. I have less of a problem with what she said than the way she said it. All right? My personal inclination, I could be wrong, would be that this woman is kind of a bigoted jerk. That would be my personal inclination from reading this. That being said, the question is, and again, bearing in mind, the lady posted this on her own personal Facebook page. And my question is, Should she not have the right to say things, however stupid and bigoted some of us may think they are, on her own dime, on her own time? The other thing you need to know is she was not at work at the time that this was posted. She posted it on her personal page while she was on vacation, on her own time. Now, that's a key thing. Now, the state administrator, of course, they very quickly backpedaled. They said it definitely does not represent the views of the court. And I'm looking for the specific quote here. Basically, they say, well, she's remorseful, but you have to understand that, they went into the whole thing, what we in the broadcast biz call a morals clause, I suppose. If you work in TV or radio, and this also applies to a lot of actors, if you're a George Clooney or a Julia Roberts, you probably have this kind of clause, although how strict they are keeping it, I don't know. Not in Hollywood. I just have no idea. But they talk about what they call a morals clause, where if you're caught in a very compromising situation, in the old days, it would have been something like Fatty Arbuckle getting caught, messing around with some girl, and she supposedly didn't give her consent, whatever. And at which time the studio could invoke this morals clause. Oh, you see with baseball, of course. You see with there was some controversy as to whether they were going to do it with the national anthem guy, Kaepernick, and the morals clause saying that if you act in a public manner that we see as being immoral or inappropriate or detrimental to our business, then we can invoke this clause and cut you out of the contract, and you get your butt cut. You get the old heave-ho. And that is a thing. A lot of businesses have that in their contracts or some version of that, and they probably do here. The thing is, if you work for somebody, you have a contract, whether it's written down or not. There are certain implications going into a job, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't play well on TV. I'm not going to get into that whole long legalistic thing. But let me just boil it down. The basic question is this. My take is this. Yeah, this lady's probably a bigoted jerk. Welcome to the club, right? But shouldn't she have the right to say things like this on her own time, on her own dollar, especially since we're talking about her being an employee of the state? I would concede that if she were working for some private organization, if she were working for Starbucks or Chick-fil-A or Hobby Lobby, and yes, I'm using those specific examples quite deliberately, if she was working for any of those private organizations, the whole thing would be a little trickier to work out. But the fact is, she's working for the state of North Dakota, or specifically this county up there in Minot, representing the county clerk's office, which makes her an employee of the government of the state by extension. And as an employee, on her own personal time, should she not have the right to say what she said? That is the question. And the number is 663-1270. Love to get your thoughts on this. I'll talk more about the 9/11 thing a little bit later on as well. 663-1270 is area code 701-663-1270. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270 with more conversation, your calls. Coming up.
Right now, 48. News headlines and weather together. Live on SuperTalk 1270.
Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be.
Yes, welcome to Shemptember. I didn't even know this, but Shemp was actually the 5,473rd Beatle. Yeah, it's silliness. Inspired silliness, I like to think. All right. The deputy court clerk in Minot reprimanded for a Facebook post where she said some arguably bigoted things about them Indians. By the way, you just know. You just know that in the hallowed halls of our state government, some of them old pasty white guys, some of them good old boys, they're just wigging out over this thing downstate. Them Indians on the warpath, they ain't got called out the National Guard. You just know they're saying that. Anyway, so this deputy court clerk, her name is Colette Osland. She posted these comments basically saying, let him keep their sacred land, but then stop all the subsidies and the handouts. And you can take that for as what you will. Some people think it's kind of a bigoted thing. My question is, should she not, bigoted or not, as you may argue it is, should she not have the right to express her opinion on her own time, on her own dime? Number in Bismarck, 663-1270, 1-701-663-1270. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. There's a whole question. And again, the fact that she is an employee of the county here, Ward County, working up there in Minot, not too far from here. And she said what she said. And I don't know that I would say the opinion itself is not necessarily a bigoted opinion. You can argue for or against the welfare state or government issuing money to certain people for certain reasons. You can argue for or against that. It doesn't necessarily make you a bigot. I will say I have more of a problem with the way she said what she said than what she said. You with me? Let me put that another way. I have less of a problem with what she said than how she said it. The way she said it makes me think, she don't like them Indians in there, But nonetheless, even if that is the case, she should have the right to express her opinion. That's my take on it. You may think I'm full of beans. Let me know if you think so. Number here is 663-1270. Love to hear from you. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270. And while we're talking about that, we're also going to get into the 9/11 thing a little bit later on. My take that we have gone way overboard in this country on the whole remember 9/11 thing. Yeah, it's become kind of a knee-jerk thing, kind of a reflexive response. 9/11, 9/11. But what have we really learned from the whole experience? That's what I'm saying. Jumping up and down and waving a piece of cloth called a flag and yelling, 9/11, 9/11. What have we learned about the whole experience? I'm not sure we've really learned much of anything. Certainly none of the right things. Anyway, we'll get to that in just a few minutes here. And again, the phone number is 663-1270. Love to hear from you. All right. From our silly file today, because, as you know, we are into the silly season here at the Big 1270. Got an article here. You've ever seen that famous picture, very historic picture? It's been in a lot of magazines. It's been in museums. I think it won a Pulitzer Prize when it was first taken back at the end of World War II. The famous picture of the sailor kissing the girl in the street of, I think it was in Times Square right after World War II ended. And everybody was like a big festive party atmosphere because everybody was, I think, just glad they survived the war. The war was over, no more of that business. And they're whooping and hollering, modesty thrown to the wind. They got the girls on their shoulders running down the street, the soldiers and the sailors. And there's this one famous picture of a sailor, young sailor, with a young girl. She looked like she might have been a nurse, and he's got her in the grave. Apparently, he just walked right up to her on the street and planted her a big sloppy one right on the old pie hole. And they got a picture of it, and people standing around going, yay, woo! And it's a great picture. Oh, by the way, next, if you've never seen the picture, you probably have seen the picture, but on the off chance you haven't, next time you go to Denny's, the one over on 7th Street in Bismarck, right up the street from Barnes & Noble, Next time you go to Denny's, they've got the picture right there in the vestibule. You walk right in, look to your left, there it is. It's a great picture. But apparently some people think the image is now inappropriate. It's amazing where we come up with this stuff, and it's amazing where some people come up with this. The woman in the photo is called The Kiss, the photograph, and it was taken on VJ Day, which has nothing to do with something you would go to the doctor for, the free clinic. No, VJ, meaning the day that it was announced that we won the war over Japan after Hiroshima and all that business. Well, the lady in the picture passed away not too long ago. She was 92 years old. Now, I mean, not when the picture was taken. She was obviously a bit younger at that point. But there are some hardcore Looney Tune feminist types who are commenting on how what you see in this picture constitutes an act of, get ready for it now, sexual assault. Bear in mind, we just won the war. People are happy. They're partying in the streets, all these sailors and soldiers. Guy walks up to a nurse, plants a big one on her, walks away. And the girl, from what we know, she said, well, yeah, this sailor grabbed me. He kissed me. It was more an act of jubilance than anything. And he walked away, and that was it. Everybody got on with their lives. But apparently now, 60 years after the fact, we're supposed to get worked up over this. The guy's name, by the way, was George Mendoza. He was a sailor, obviously. And we assumed that he was just, just happy that the war was over, and he was grateful to the nurses. You know, the nurses made a major contribution on the front lines in saving people's lives. You know, a lot of times it's not the doctors that save your butt, it's the nurses. And some of those nurses in in any war, really, some of those nurses are the real heroes of that whole situation, even more so than the doctors. So anyway, he sees her and he tips her backwards and plants one big square right on the kisser. And now we have feminist groups arguing that, looking back on it, boy, they say things like, well, we realize that was a different time, but boy, we've come so far today. If they did that today, we'd be all over them and we'd be pressing charges. And isn't that a great thing that we no longer allow this kind of sexual assault on the streets, on the public streets? Some days I come into this place and I pick up the news and I look at it. And I just want to go and put on my little propeller hat and just go traipsing off. Woo! Hell with it. Some days I just feel like that. All right. So let's move onward and upward here. Nowhere to go but up at this point. Back to the issue at hand. We have the lady who works in the county clerk's office up in Minot, North Dakota. For whatever county, what county is that again? That's Ward County, thank you. The office is up in Minot. And she posted some comments on her personal Facebook, and I double-checked this. I even contacted the guy who wrote, the original article was in the Fargo Forum, inforum.com, and I contacted the guy. I said, just to make it clear, she did this on her own personal Facebook site on her own time. And he said, yes, it was her own site, and she did it. She was not at work. She was on vacation. She was nowhere near the office at the time that she posted it. So it was her own time, her own dime, so to speak. Well, I thought, in that case, shouldn't she have the right to say what she said? Whatever it was she said. I mean, it's not like she was inciting anybody to violence. There are obvious times when you say things that you shouldn't be allowed to say, yelling movie in a crowded firehouse and all that. But in this particular case, she expressed what is obviously an unpopular opinion. But shouldn't she have the right on her own time to say it? That's what I'm saying here. Number 663-1270, 1-701-663-1270. Give me a ring. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270, supertalk1270.com. More conversation, your calls coming up.
Right now, 48. Dave Ramsey is heard here. SuperTalk 1270.
Don't you think we're overdoing it a bit with the whole Remember 9/11 thing? Every year now, it's been 15 years. I'm inclined to think there's a lot of knee-jerkedness going on, a lot of reflexive saluting and hand-wringing and remembrances. And of course, nobody wants to forget what happened, but isn't it possible to go too far in trying to make a point? Number here is 663-1270. Are we going overboard with the 9/11 thing? Over the weekend, I'm looking at Facebook, my personal account, and people are just going nuts with this. Remember 9/11? But my question is, okay, fine, but what have we learned from it all? I remember the day it happened, and I actually remember this more vividly than the event itself. The afternoon that it happened, they sent us home from, I was not working here at the time. I was working in another city. And they sent us home for the day. And I hooked up with my brother. We went for lunch in my hometown at one of our local eateries, place where we used to love to go for the bacon and eggs. Kind of a greasy spoon kind of place, but a cool place. You know, one of those great places they serve breakfast all day long. And we're sitting there, and they've got the TV on. It's tuned to CNN, Fox, whatever. And they're showing the footage over and over again. Everything going on, the guy falling, and the second plane going in, and the people in the streets. And I remember, I turned to my brother and I said, "You know, Bill, today we have had a taste of the future. This is just a sneak preview of what's to come." My question is, what are we going to learn from all this? And, you know, here we are 15 years later. I'm still waiting for an answer. Rhetorically speaking, I mean, I don't expect my brother to come up with an answer any more than I have an answer. But what have we learned from it? Apparently not a lot, because there's still a lot of people who seem to think that this whole overkill thing with the tacky souvenirs and the snow globes with the Twin Towers, I'm kind of fatigued out. I'm kind of burned out on the whole thing, frankly. What about you? What's your rumble on this subject? 663-1270, 663-1270. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270. I got to tell you, I loved the Twin Towers passionately. I'm not a New Yorker. I didn't grow up in New York, but I spent a lot of time there in my young adult years. I had a brother, the same brother I was just mentioning. He lived in New York for many years. He lived in Greenwich Village, in the East Village. He moved out of New York shortly before all of this happened, coincidentally enough. But I actually visited the Twin Towers one time in the late winter, early spring of 1989. A beautiful sunny day. It was just starting to get warm again after a long, hard winter. And we went up Sunday afternoon. My brother and I went up on the observation deck. Yeah, you know, the things you notice about it, like the fact that the elevators, you can hear the wind whooshing up the elevators because it's like 100 or so stories, you know, straight up in the elevator shaft. In fact, as I recall, you couldn't go all the way up in one elevator. You had to get off. You had to get off at some point, like halfway up, and then get on another one and go up the rest of the way, for whatever reason, architectural reasons or whatever, or maybe it's a safety thing. I don't know. I always wondered how that affected people's ability to get out of there when the whole thing happened on 9/11. But the point is, So you've got this very haunting sound, this whoosh noise, it sounds like there's a little tornado thing going on in the elevator shaft when you get off, like that. And then, and the look, of course, the view from Lower Manhattan is just spectacular. I mean, New York is just such an amazing place, and from any angle. But you get up there at the highest vantage point of the city, on the extreme downtown end of Manhattan Island, and you look to the north, and you see all the famous buildings. You see the Empire State Building, which is also kind of a trip if you've ever been there. You see the Chrysler Building, you see the UN, and you look to one side, you see New Jersey. You look to the other side, you see Long Island, or Long Island, as they say. Very spectacular view. I bought a couple of coffee cups there today. I actually have one of them sitting right here in the studio next to me. I'm holding it in my hand right now. It's New York with the silhouette of the Statue of Liberty. I have another one at home. It's the, did you ever see this New York View of the World cartoon? It's basically a caricature of what the rest of the world looks like from the New York perspective. They used to print in a magazine called The New Yorker, which I do believe you can get nationally. It's a great... Anyway, I bought it at the World Trade Center, and I still have it. It's I officially retired it a couple of years ago. I no longer use it for drinking coffee. I've got it at home sitting on the shelf. So I myself have very strong feelings about what happened. Nonetheless, I look at all the coverage on TV and radio. There's a lot of it, but the coverage you're getting, not very much of it is very deep. It's wide, it's cast wide, but it's not very deep. I don't see a lot of really substantial commentary on this subject. Like, apparently it's not just us. Certain countries around the world, I'm told... somebody on Facebook told me that over in Ireland, they had, at one point, they had 14 different 9/11 themed programs. And, of course, here at any given time, they had as much as 40 different things going on on the dial. You got 57 channels and nothing on but 9/11, apparently. Thank you, Mr. Springsteen. And you got all the really tacky crap. Did you hear about the commercial? Trying to remember where. Oh, San Antonio, Texas. The mattress company that actually did this commercial. They ran it on Facebook as an ad. And the only thing I can think of is they must have been the people who sold them the time, who sold them the advertising, they must have been thinking, well, we're going to take their money and just, because it's Facebook, we'll just kind of hope that nobody really looks at it. That's the only rationale I can come up with because, and you can Google it for yourself, 9/11 mattress commercial, TV, Facebook, outrage, put words like that in your Google box there. And you can see it for yourself. It's one of these cheesy mattress commercials that you see in just about every market in America. A lot of them are not very good. Some are better than others. Some are okay. We run a couple here. They're okay, because we have people here who kind of know what they're doing. So the commercials we run here, no problem. But some of them in some markets, they get really tacky. You can tell that the people taking the money just don't care. And that was the case with this commercial in San Antonio, Texas, where apparently it looked like a family operation. There was the one girl and there was two guys behind them, and they had mattresses piled up behind them to look like the Twin Towers. I think you know where I'm going with this already. And the guys were standing there, and at one point, the girl just throws her arms out, and the guys lose their balance. They fall back on the pile of mattresses, and they both come down like did the Twin Towers. I couldn't make this crap up, believe me. I'm not that imaginative. This is an actual thing. And they took a lot of guff for it. But apparently it's real. Apparently it is a real thing. And they took a lot of guff for it. My question is, as tacky as, couple of questions. Number one, you don't something like this is not a one-person production. A number of people had to be involved in the making of this commercial, especially in light of the fact that it was a TV or it was a video production, like you would do for a TV commercial, which is a little more complicated than radio, because in radio you're dealing with the sound, and TV you got the sound plus the picture. So just by nature of the whole logistical thing, you've got a number of people involved in putting this thing together and getting it scheduled and getting the money and getting it scheduled to run on Facebook, however they do their scheduling with their algorithms or whatever. But I'm thinking, with all the people who presumably were involved in getting this thing from the drawing board onto Facebook as an actual production, actual video, with all the people who had to be involved, there's not one single person in that whole line who said, wait a minute, we can't run this. People are going to tar and feather us, chase us out of town, all of us. People who run the store and the people who approve the advertising. We're going to get blackballed. We're going to get run out of town. We're going to lose our business. We're going to have to change our names and move across the country if we put this on the air or on the internet. I mean, that's what I would have been. Maybe it's a case of, I don't know, people had second thoughts, but nobody wanted to, nobody wanted to stir things up. I don't know why they did what they did. But the other point, is it really that much more tacky than a lot of stuff we see on a regular basis, especially around this time of year when the anniversary comes up? I really think we're dealing with some 9/11 overkill, and the danger in that is that we're going to get used to it. We're going to get desensitized to it. I think we're already past that point, actually. And it's not really going to mean anything anymore. We get all worked up because some football player doesn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Meanwhile, this tacky, tasteless stuff goes running right by our eyes and ears on the airwaves, and we don't even blink. Come on. Number here, 663-1270. Your comments welcomed and appreciated. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270 with more conversation. Your calls coming up.
Currently, it's 50.
News and Views with Joel Heitkamp. Weekdays on SuperTalk 1270.
Here we come, walk down the street.
50 years ago last night. Turned on your TV and there they were. For those of us who were there, there was that one brief, glorious period of time, fall of 66, fall and winter, 66, 67, when the Monkees were a pretty cool deal. They were the hot thing on TV and, of course, on radio, playing all the hits. And, they did one song very early in their career. They did that song, Last Train to Clarksville, which, if you listen to it, a lot of people didn't realize this at the time, but it was actually a very subversive song. It was an anti-war song. The song was about a guy who's on the phone and he's telling his girlfriend he's got to leave, take the last train to Clarksville. I'll meet you at the station. I want to see you one more time because I don't know if I'm ever coming. It was a war song. The guy was being shipped off to war. People don't realize that, and it went right under everybody's noses, especially the old geezers. Went right under their noses, and they never noticed. I think it was like Bob Dylan once said, the best way to be subversive is to act as though you're not subversive, to be cool disguised as uncool. Know what I mean? Well, the Monkees apparently were very subversive, in a good way, of course. And there was that very brief, glorious moment, and it didn't last long, because we're talking fall of 66. By the following spring, flash forward 6 months to the spring of 67, and everybody's already getting into heavy psychedelic hard rock. We had Hendrix. We had the Grateful Dead. We had some of the hard acts from San Francisco. We had the radio was changing. We had in a lot of markets, we had the heavy FM hard rock psychedelic thing going. Underground radio is what we used to call it. And a lot of that in the beginning especially was very different and very exciting to listen to by virtue of the kind of very freewheeling thing going on. You know, these guys like Tom Donahue, B. Mitchell Reed, and some of the big towns, and the smaller town. I'm sure Minneapolis had a couple stations like that at the time, the Twin Cities, and eventually it happened in North Dakota too. Although being North Dakota, unfortunately, and this is not a put down, we were probably a little behind the curve on that. That's okay, because the point is, it was out there, it was happening, but. For that brief period of time before that, from the fall of '66, right about the time the Beatles stopped touring, and they were getting into the whole Sgt. Pepper thing. But on the radio, the Monkees were the hot thing. And if you listen to it today, the music holds up very well, I think. Certainly a lot better than the TV show. The TV show is stupid. Always was, always will be. Of course, when you're kids, it was a TV show for little kids, obviously. And pre-teen girls. They were the prefab four, and they had kind of a pre-teen audience. They were like the Beatles for little kids. I mean, the Beatles were for kids, but the Monkees were for little kids. They were like the Beatles for little kids, right? At least that was the perception. But a lot of the music does hold up very well. And, guys like Mickey Dolenz, world-class entertainer. He had some TV. Well, they all were. They're all talented entertainers. Stephen Stills was almost a monkey. He auditioned for the job. You know who else auditioned to be a monkey? I've heard this story for years. Somebody told me that Charles Manson actually auditioned for the Monkees. Try picturing that in your mind's eye. Here we come. Okay. Mike Nesmith. Mike Nesmith, very capable musician, fine musician in his own right. These guys could play. They didn't play much of their own instruments, at least not at the beginning. They had a group in L.A. called the Wrecking Crew. These were the guys who worked on all the recording sessions. They worked with Elvis. They worked with Sinatra. They worked with Phil Spector, any of the big acts. They were on Pet Sounds, the Beach Boys album. These guys, they were the hired guns of rock and roll. They were the professional musicians. And a lot of them were pretty old guys who had been around since the old jazz era. But they wanted to stay in the business. They wanted to make a living making music. So they stayed in the business by becoming studio musicians, and they learned how to play all this new music and how to be experimental in the studio. And guys like Brian Wilson, you listen to Pet Sounds, just about all the musicians on there are these old jazz guys who at the time were like 60, 70 years old. Guys like Barney Kessel, a great jazz guitarist, who worked with people like, he worked with Billie Holiday and Louis Armstrong and people from that era. And in the 60s, he was still around. He still wanted to make music, He wanted to do something with his life skills, so he got into the studio thing. He probably didn't listen to much of it when he went home at night. He probably listened to his music when he went home, the classic jazz or Dixieland or whatever, Sinatra. Sinatra was another one. Yeah, Sinatra, when he recorded in L.A., he used this group of guys, this group of old jazz guys called the Wrecking Crew. Well, they were not old. There were some young guys. Who was a member of the Wrecking Crew is Glenn Campbell. When Glenn went to L.A., Glenn grew up in Arkansas. He went to L.A. to make his mark. And he scrounged around for a couple of years, and he was a really good guitar player, so somebody got him in as a member of the Wrecking Crew because he was a great solo player. And he was a guy, he was young enough that he could very comfortably adapt himself to just about any kind of music that came along, that they wanted him to record. Glenn, we got Buck Owens coming in today. Okay, sure. Glenn was a country boy. Glenn, we got the Ronettes are cutting their new record, or the Righteous Brothers, they have a new record they're doing. Yeah, sure, okay, well, whatever. And the other amazing thing about Glenn Campbell is, to this day, he couldn't read music. You know, well, I know about Glenn Campbell and his health issues. I shouldn't put it that way. That's unfortunate. But Glenn Campbell in his prime, he never learned to read a single note of music. It was all this guy never had a formal lesson in his life. Everything he learned sitting on the front porch with his family, and it's probably some. All these guys, they had mentors, like some of these young country singers. They had these old blues guys who would hang around the neighborhood, and they learned to play, using a knife or a slide effect, and they'd sit on the front porch. Well, that was Glenn Campbell. He was one of them. Anyway, what I'm saying is these guys were world-class musicians, and they should not be forgotten. That's all I have to say. We got a break. Got Brandmeier coming up in the 12 o'clock hour this afternoon. Your comments welcome. SuperTalk1270.com, the website. Check it out for yourself. Leave your comments. And I'll be back again at some point in the next few days, so hang in there. And once again, thanks for listening. SuperTalk 1270 and SuperTalk1270.com.